This is episode 632 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined for this episode by Rebecca Dow. Among other things, she is the project manager for the Opportunities for All Kids New Mexico project, which you can find at oaknm.org. And it's a project of the Rio Grande Foundation. So, welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, it is back to school time here for kiddos across the state, including my own. And education is a percolating issue politically across the country. Why don't you take a minute to describe your own passion for the issue and your work with the OAK project?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm as a mom of two children who went through the K-12 system in the state of New Mexico, and then even my daughter in higher ed, she got her master's at Western New Mexico University. As a parent, my husband and I were actively engaged in our kids' education, which that's the number one indicator of success. All this fluff and everything that goes on, everything we talk about, parents are the number one indicator of student success. And we retained our right to make our children's education decisions. And through K-12, they attended public school, private school, homeschool. They did dual enrollment, and at times a hybrid of these things. And so I truly believe that parents know their children best, that from the time they're born until adulthood, that they are their biggest cheerleader. Of course, there's exceptions to that, when people demonstrate, that they don't have their children's best interest in mind. But until that is proven, that we should assume parents care the most, that they would make the best investments for their children, and that they are their child's best advocate and expert. And so when the opportunity to partner with you guys on this Opportunity for All Kids came about, I just thought it was perfect timing and sign me up. Because even as we speak, we have candidates running right now who believe that the government makes the best decisions for children, not parents. And we have candidates saying that our children are everyone's children. And I just do not affirm to that. And so happy to partner with you. And so what we've been working on, it's pretty brand new, June forward, we've really launched, is having community meetings across the state, just conversations about what matters. And I have been pleasantly surprised at the diversity of people who show up for these meetings, from public school board members, public school superintendents, to parents who are homeschooling, to people who are looking for alternatives and their child doesn't fit in this box of one size fits all, and they're looking for options. And we've had great meetings across the state. And if anybody's interested, get a hold of us. We'll come to your community and just talking about solutions in New Mexico, who ranks absolutely dead last in the nation for education outcomes. And we've got to do better for our kids.
Well, since you mentioned it, how would people get in touch with you,
Oh,
Rebecca?
awesome. Well, I mean, I'll give my cell phone number out. My cell phone number is 575-571-1056. I'm on Facebook. I'm on X. Just look up Rebecca Dow. I'm pretty easy to find. And of course, they can reach out through my Opportunity for All Kids email address, which is rebecca@riograndefoundation.org. And yeah, we're having these meetings all the time. These conversations are good. And it's interesting to me that in a state where we're supposed to question everything. I was raised question everything, know the reason why. We're taught that a healthy adult is someone who can think critically, solve problems, and yet we're supposed to make assumptions that exactly what's been happening all these years is going to create a different outcome, without analyzing and breaking things down and deciding what will produce other outcomes, or even looking. We live in this republic with 50 states, looking to what other states are doing, because every single one of them have higher student outcomes than New Mexico. What are the best practices in other states that are helping them rise to the top and are helping their children reach their full potential? So those are the kind of conversations we're having, and common themes are rising to the top.
And you can also use the OAK website to reach out. There's a contact button, and it just requires your name and email address, and send a quick message as well. So that's oaknm.org. Well, one of the projects going on, because this is an election season, back to school, We're trying to get a grasp on where people running for office stand, specifically the legislature. Uh, and we talk about money following the students and educational choice. We're nowhere near that right now in New Mexico. So you have your work cut out for us. We all do in terms of trying to advocate for those kinds of policies. And it's not just the candidate survey is not just about choice. That would be a very simple one question uh, survey, and nowhere near the majority of legislators would say yes. But we're talking about other
They
ways.
do, although they do choose choice for their own children and grandchildren, they're not choosing it for our most vulnerable population in New Mexico. I
Absolutely.
would have to point that out.
Yeah. So talk about the survey and what we're trying to get
Yeah.
done here.
So the survey kind of came out of going to these meetings across the state and finding where there's commonality in these people who are coming to the meetings to talk about education reform. And those are leaders in public school. Those are leaders in charter schools, which are a form of public school. Those are folks from homeschool and private school. And I mean, the community at large that's coming out. There's been a very important issue that's risen to the top that everyone has agreed on, regardless of where their children attend or how they're involved in education. And it is that parents are their child's best expert, and that parents, unless they prove otherwise, have a right to raise their children and make education and healthcare decisions for them. So you and I went back and forth on like, what does this candidate survey look like? And we tried to make it simple, stay out of the minutia. It's literally 3 questions. And the first question is, do you believe that parents have a right to review their children's curriculum, including, extracurricular programs that might be presented through a third party? Because that does happen more and more now. And the next question was, do you believe that parents should have the freedom to speak freely at a school board meeting? Can we keep control local with the school board? And then the third question does give them the right to say yes, no, or to describe their position on dollars following students. Pretty simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And that survey, you won't receive your copy unless you're a legislative candidate, either an incumbent or a candidate running as a challenger. That's just the way we're doing things right now. We assume that most friends of the Rio Grande Foundation support this kind of policy. And at the very least, we need more accountability in our education system if we're not going to get choice anytime in the near future. But working along those 2 tracks. Now, one of the things specifically with back to school that we've seen, and this is an article from KOB4. Now, I'll say as a starting point, in my kids' we exercise our choice by sending our kids to Catholic schools for a variety of reasons. But I'm looking at a KOB4 story, classrooms hot, cooling units not working at APS schools. Now, if there's an evergreen story here in New Mexico, it would be that schools start earlier and earlier, now into early August, and the AC units or not refrigerated air or what do they call those? Evaporative air, swamp coolers, the colloquial, aren't quite working. And look, I get it. It's a lot of maintenance, a lot of issues, but if you're going to drag the kids back, this story is from published August 7th, 2024, you're going to have issues, severe issues, if the AC units, I don't even think evaporative air is going to get the job done, period, given that early type of year and that heat. So that's a serious issue that affects learning at all levels. And it kind of, quite frankly, what are the old line, first, you can't have a second first impression, or first impressions, or, they really lock in that environment. And unfortunately, it was a fail yet again for a lot of students.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the focus is on this longer school year, longer day. The governor is in court right now over failed legislation that she continues to push through rules and regs on the 4-day versus 5-day week. They just more
We'll
days.
get to that in a minute, but yes,
it's
I know.
it's more of these. The solution isn't going to school longer if you're so hot or so hungry or, you're not rested. All these circumstances, Maslow's hierarchy of needs say children learn best when they're safe and secure in their surrounding. When their needs are met, they can be active learners. So looking at those things actually could be things that have nothing to do with the days of school or the, when the school year starts, but we're focused on these mandates that continually produce the same failing outcomes. It's not more rules, it's not more regs, it's innovation in education. It's giving educators, I think school choice is choice for educators, giving them the chance to innovate outside of all these restrictions that so far have not resulted. We've actually gone backwards, not forward in student outcomes.
Well, that's absolutely the case. And it does seem that, it's like, I don't know, some of the old timey doctors when you were suffering from some malady, and so they brought out the leeches and sucked the bad blood out, and that's because they didn't know what they were doing. Now we know what students will respond to and what they won't respond to. It's different for every student, so it's not completely like a medical problem, but just doing more of what we're already doing has pretty much proven itself to not work.
And people say, oh, there's all the initiatives to educate teachers and to give them specialized training and where it matters most, where students or measurements can be made. But we have some of the highest turnover rates in the state. So if your child is being taught by someone who's a first year teacher, then, they spent all this training on the person who quit, left the field, went to a different district, and students are still being taught by people on waivers, long-term subs, new educators because they've left the field. And so all those investments that they say would be made if we invest in the teacher and their specialized training and how they will teach, it doesn't come to fruition if you have these kind of high turnover rates, or if students are just miserable in heat and teachers are miserable in heat as well. I mean, there's no logic to it. The longer days, meaning we go back when it's hotter, doesn't make sense. All the Western states around us, we have more days than they do already, and they have higher outcomes than us. So why we're implementing arbitrary requirements through rules and regs, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so let's talk about the 4-day and 5-day school week issue. Now, I don't know how closely you followed some of the litigation and the fact that this has gone to arbitration, which seemed quite bizarre to me, but perhaps you can shed some light on the situation. Long story short, the legislature in 2023 added requirements in terms of time in the classroom. Now, by my count, New Mexico is the third most hours required per school year. Only Texas and Maryland, two highly divergent states, politically left, politically right, have more of a requirement for time in the classroom. But they did not demand 5-day school weeks. They allowed districts flexibility as to how that got done, especially in rural New Mexico. It seems to be an important issue for them. The governor tried to push this in the legislature, failed on a bipartisan basis, then did this regulatorily after the legislative session, and was promptly sued. The judge put a stay on it, so this will not, unless she does it like Christmas break or something, she gets what she needs and forces the 5-day school week on people at the tail end of the year. I can't imagine that she'll do it for the rest of the year this year. So I think we're okay on the 4-day school week. But you tell me what's going on. What's this arbitration stuff? Any other information you have on that?
Oh, I really didn't know about the arbitration. I think that's very interesting that we would go into arbitration over something that it seems after the governor pushed the rules and over 4,000 individual comments were sent back in opposition to it, and after the majority of the school districts sued PED, and after both the House, the Senate, and the Legislative Education Interim Committee sent letters clarifying for the judge that this was not their legislative intent. They actually voted against this. They voted it down. I don't understand the purpose of arbitration. I'm not a lawyer.
I apologize. Mediation, not arbitration.
Oh, okay. Mediation.
I believe the difference being that arbitration is legally binding when the arbitrator comes back with a decision.
Okay.
Whereas mediation is simply getting two parties who disagree together to try to come to an agreement. I think it's silly as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand. Lawmakers are the appropriators of the budget. They did not fund 5-day school week. And lawmakers, they make the laws, and they voted no on the 4-day school week. I don't know why there would be mediation. I hope they don't settle for that. Although the school districts are the ones that are suing, not the legislature. And I think the bigger issue around that is just the trend of PED, this governor, whether it's the public education department or any other agency, to just, if she doesn't win in her House and Senate where she has 2/3 majority, she just passed these things through rules and regs. And it's an overreach. It's not the intent. The legislation fails, and then she just does it through rules and regs. So it's this heavy hand of top-down governance taking away more and more local school board authority. And we, as local citizens, elect our school board because they're the people we see at the Little League. We see them in the restaurants. We see them at church. We can hold them accountable for the decisions that they're making for our children. And we believe that they know our children and our communities best. And so I see PED coming in and doing this top-down rulemaking, and that is a form of taking away local school board autonomy and taking away that local decision-making authority. And I think that the districts were right to sue.
Yeah, I totally agree. And real quickly to add a few points, that the article which appeared in the Albuquerque Journal was from July 31st, 2024, talking about mediation. And it also notes that just to understand where things are, 55 of the state's 89 school districts have joined that particular lawsuit. So it is a healthy number of those districts that are opposed to what the governor's doing. And it's unfortunate. It should be all of them because it's I don't want to get too hyperbolic, but it's kind of like the old line about first they came for the rural districts, and then they came for somebody else. And if you don't stand up for your power with the rural districts when this governor's abusing her power, which she has a extremely long track record of abusing her power, it's only going to be a matter of time before she comes to take your power from maybe an urban district like APS or whatever.
Well, and I think on the 4-day school week, an important thing to note is that it's not data driven. There's no data driven outcome that's going to come for that. So if you're looking at student outcomes, you can't even justify it in that way because 40 of the top 100 performing schools in the state, what they call spotlight schools, have 4-day school weeks. And if every single child, it's mostly rural. So if every single child in a 4-day school week met the minimum literacy and math standards that they're seeking, it would only change the overall student performance by 4%. So we're not even targeting the students who need it most. We're not even addressing what has any sort of evidence-based student performance improvements behind it. So it's literally arbitrary and contrary to legislative intent and costing more per student for education and going against local school board authority. There's no win in it.
Yeah, and I want to take a minute because it has been an ongoing concern of ours. Broadly speaking, Rio Grande Foundation, OAK wasn't necessarily even a thing at this at the time, but I'm going to cite the National Assessment of Educational Progress data. You could look at a lot of different sites for New Mexico's education woes. I know you're familiar with this information. In 2019, New Mexico students on 4th grade reading scored 208. That dropped to 202 by 2022. 202 as a score. And these numbers are not really, they don't have any meaning aside from just scoring relative to previous years or other states that are taking these tests. But our reading scores and our math scores are the worst in the country, 4th grade and 8th grade. So we went down 6 points, lowest scores since 1992 in the history of New Mexico taking this test. We now lag the national number by 14 points, which is as bad as it's ever been. At or above basic is now 48% of the student population. And only 21% of New Mexico's students are at or above proficient in reading on the 4th grade reading test. Now, I use 4th grade reading. Well, why don't you tell us why 4th grade reading is important?
Oh no, go ahead.
You're
no,
the expert.
Go ahead.
Well,
I'm not an expert. My world's early childhood.
But Susana Martinez specifically tried to address 4th grade reading because if you're not reading to learn after fourth grade. If you're not able to read, you are sitting in front of a science textbook or a word problem or a history book, and you cannot read that book. Therefore, you are on a likely trajectory towards dropping out of school. So that was one of the reasons why Susana Martinez, as governor, tried to focus so heavily on early childhood reading. And Mississippi has experienced success.
And they stuck with it.
And they
passed
stuck
it
with
around the same time. When
Yes.
Michelle Lujan Grisham was elected, she abandoned that third grade proficiency effort that was put in place under the Martinez administration. Mississippi stuck with it.
Right.
And people used to say, thank goodness for Mississippi about New Mexico. You can't say that anymore because I know you follow this much more closely than I do.
Well, so the ultimate point here is that contrary to a launch, or what the governor's term was, a moonshot. Yeah. We're actually in the Austin Powers mode of going down to the core of the center of the earth in terms of our education results, because since this governor took over, New Mexico has actually deteriorated quite significantly in terms of education outcomes. We're not treading water. We're drowning in an ocean of failure when it comes to education. So I know that you know that, but is there any impetus in Santa Fe to move the needle in a more positive direction?
I think there's a whole lot of people in Santa Fe that want to. I think across the state of New Mexico, bipartisan. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue, and I think everybody's willing to spend whatever it takes. What does it take? Turn education around. Because if you're a small business owner, you need to hire an employee who can function in their day-to-day duties. If you are a parent or a grandparent or a retiree, everyone depends on a functional workforce, and you want children to succeed, and you want them to overcome the barriers that have plagued the state for far too long. When the Voices for New Mexico Kids Count report comes out, we all sigh, in disappointment that we've made the greatest investment ever and we're not getting better, it's getting worse. And so you have to say, all these people with solutions up in Santa Fe, they all require more rules, more regulations, more bureaucracy, more oversight, more administrative time, more paperwork, more documentation, and the students are falling farther and further behind. The thing we haven't tried in New Mexico is dollars following students. And you had shared with me an article from a few days ago saying that this year Albuquerque Public Schools is spending $33,000 per student. And you hear people like, supporting public education is a noble cause. Why is it a noble cause if it's failing? Because poor vulnerable children are stuck in these failing schools. It's not fair that they would be stuck in a public school but not be able to go to a private school. The state of New Mexico is spending in Albuquerque $33,000 per student is what the study showed, whereas Albuquerque Academy is $28,000. What low-income, at-risk, first-generation English speaker child shouldn't have a right to go to Albuquerque Academy? We're spending that much with no outcome. What about St. Pius? It's like $14.50. Hope is $11,000. I'm talking about some schools in Albuquerque. I know you have a statewide audience, but the average private school in New Mexico is less than $10,000, and homeschooling costs even less. To be able to homeschool your child because you live in a rural community and maybe you farm and ranch and you rodeo on the weekends, and you're putting affordable, high quality food on our table. And yet you've got to figure out how to get your children to these long distances, hour and a half, 2-hour commute to school every day. Whereas you could buy curriculum you use at home and supplement your child's education with tutoring and, $33,000. When I heard that, one of my friends who's in the car with me said, that's like hiring a person. I could hire a person myself, to be on one-on-one with my children. So, but yet we insist on supporting a failing system where we fund a facility, not students, not student needs, and where we are beholden to the union in this pre-21st century assembly line, school model that was designed to teach children to a median. It doesn't work for 21st century students. We are failing. It's time to change. And I would assert again that choice for students, choice for parents is also choice for educators, because there are amazing educators in New Mexico who are frustrated, who are counting the days to their retirement, who are leaving the field even without their retirement because they simply cannot stand the broken system any longer and they know they could do better. And so it's time to consider school choice.
Well, I don't want to take undue credit for calling the APS per pupil spending number a study. It was simply a gathering of a few data points. The annual budget, which is $2.15 billion for APS in the 2024-2025 school year. That's a slight decline. I know, Rebecca, it's an education budget has been slashed in New Mexico from 2.16 billion to 2.15 billion. However, the enrollments at
There we
APS
go. That's what I was wondering.
is down oh so dramatically. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but you mentioned people taking their children out of state, people taking their kids to other schools and non-public schools, etc. But
Homeschooling.
homeschooling,
New Mexico, I don't know if this is still true for this school year, but last school year, we had the highest growing population of homeschoolers in the nation.
yeah. So in FY16, APS had 85,336 students. So that's a few years ago. That number has been declining markedly every single year through now where we are at fiscal year 2025, 64,995 students. So that's why you have a exploding per pupil budget when you have at least for 1 year, a slight decline in the overall top number, but continued drops in the student population itself. And there's also the issue of kids not going to school at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Talk about that. I mean, you have a free product that is proven to be the best way to get a better life for yourself, for your child. Well, obviously for the child, not for yourself, long term, maybe long term. But and they won't get the kid to school, or the kid won't go to school. Just what do you have on that? Talk about that issue.
It's interesting because they've surveyed students, and students will say themselves that not having to go to school during COVID and being able to accomplish their schoolwork in less than an 8-hour day and in less than the minimum days required in a year, they don't have as much patience or as much value in the habit of going to school every day. And I think parents saw, this is, anecdotal. I don't know that anybody's done like a study about it. It's just more difficult for the kids to go to school. They have a lot more stress and anxiety in the social environment that's happening at school. And again, I mean, this is why we could be innovative. I'm a grandma of a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a 1-month-old. And the 2-year-old is the busiest little guy I've ever seen in my life. He doesn't sit still until he is down for nap. And the guy goes 150 miles an hour. And to think about him being just a few years away from being expected to sit in a seat for 8 hours a day, I cannot imagine it. And when we have the opportunity to look at literally any of the other 50 states, to look at any other nation and look at innovative education, and to be in a state where lawmakers say they care about children but will not allow those innovations to occur, education innovations to occur, is just, it's hypocritical and it's not true. We've got to call people out for what they really are doing, and they're forcing children to go to a system that isn't designed to meet their needs. Children do not learn the way they learned in the past, and we can do innovation. So one of my grandsons is in Spokane, and there are 5 schools in Spokane that they don't even have a facility. The entire day happens outdoors. They learn outdoors. The entire curriculum is outdoors. And it's not as many hours, but when you go to their site and you look at their educational outcomes, their students are critical thinkers, they're problem solvers, they are learning in diverse ways, and they're healthy, they're in the outdoors, they're building up their immune system, and basically, what Maslow's hierarchy of needs says, their basic needs are met, they're safe and they're secure in their surroundings, and they're actively learning in different ways that meet their need. So they are meeting those proficiencies in math and reading and there is no schoolroom. It's the outdoors. And I'm just like, why isn't that good enough for New Mexico kids? Why won't we innovate and allow that to happen? And you have to, be honest and say, teachers unions and the unions that stand up for their sisters and brothers are really a barrier, because lawmakers are elected by the money that's donated only to those candidates that support the traditional school setting to stay exactly like it is.
Yeah. And boy, I mean, Spokane is in Washington State. Last time I checked, that is a deep blue state as well, like New Mexico, but something must be done there politically to allow that kind of innovation that's simply not being allowed here in New Mexico. And
Well, I think 12 states have dollars following students. So there's a whole lot of innovation happening in those states.
right, those are
And
mostly red
17,
states.
yes,
Yeah.
and 17 states, there's some sort of tax credit or reimbursement to parents when they choose a different setting. And we all know what happens when there's competition. I mean, people point to Walmart as this big box store as the bad guy that drives down cost or keeps wages low or whatever. But like in state where we have competition, where there's innovation, there's improvements. If you're
Well,
not allowed to innovate and there is no competition, how could you expect improvements?
right. Well, let's talk about that real quick. You're from Truth or Consequences, not a urban hub like Albuquerque, and I don't want to get into, but you feel free to share, whatever challenges that folks face in TRC. We know it's not the most wealthy area of the state of New
I think
Mexico.
it's usually Sierra County or Luna that are the poorest in the state.
Right. But the what I'm getting at is that a lot of people, when you talk about school choice, say, oh, well, that may work in Albuquerque or the big urban areas. That won't work in Truth or Consequences, as one example. And I believe that that is an inaccurate statement. But talk about how school choice could work if money followed the students in T or C or another place. Or does it work already?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what's happening without the dollars following students. The most vulnerable children, the students who need the most support, they are at the public school because their parents can't afford another option. There are middle income families in Sierra County that are choosing a sort of a homeschool hybrid. So some of them pay and carpool each other to Las Cruces there's a Monday, let's say a homeschool co-op, and they meet on Monday, they do activities together, and then they do the curriculum themselves at home during the week. But they get together on Mondays to hold each other accountable and make sure they're on track. They're literally busing kids down to Mesilla Valley Christian School, and people who can afford to pay that. And then there are people who I know of teachers who have left the public school system that are working from home with groups of 6 to 10 kids. And they're not calling it micro school, but something emerged out of COVID called micro schools, and there is seed money to start a micro school, and throughout the nation through the Micro School Association. But these families are all pitching in and paying for a teacher at home that has groups. I've heard of some that have 6, some that have as many as 13 kids, and it's kind of like your one-room school, but it's in a home, and they're all pitching in to pay for this teacher to be at home. And what I'm hearing about are field trips. They're doing 4-H or they're doing FFA projects. A lot of them are younger. 4-H, if people haven't looked at that, they have over 1,500 projects. They call them project books that could be themes, anything from people are familiar with 4-H for like fairs and showing, but they have art, public speaking, they have robotics, they have all kinds of things going on. And they're using this free this free 4-H project books to build their homeschool curriculum. And so they're doing these different things, and I've seen them using different curriculum for each subject, just like they would at a public school, and then working with the interest of the kids that are kind of pulling together with these teachers. But they're pitching in and doing that, and you choosing to put your kids in a private Catholic school, you now have 529s, but there's not anything to reimburse parents who are choosing to homeschool their kids. And they're paying this out of pocket. And it's really the people who are able to navigate this, who can afford it, who can get together and talk about it and provide solutions. The work I did in TRC was targeted toward the kids that need it most. The kids who need it most and the ones who are in the CYFT system, who are constantly reunited with their abusers, who need us to think outside the box and find solutions to them to help them overcome the adversity and the abuse and the politically correct term adverse childhood experiences that they're having, are profounded and complicated by being forced into a failing school system where teachers and educators who have solutions are not allowed to innovate. They are overregulated. It's a top-down approach, and it is a broken system, and we have to find a way to set educators and students free if we want to see New Mexico statistics change. But these people who say they care are more bought in to supporting the union and a union, these union jobs than they are getting down to what the children need to overcome the adversities in their life.
Well, I know this is a very important issue for all New Mexicans. It's an issue that you are very passionate about, and that's why we've got you working on it here in our state. And CYFD and unpacking all of the issues at that particular agency, um, that's an obvious, huge issue, something that needs to be undertaken. It's beyond the scope of this particular interview in a real in-depth way. We're trying to uh, at least do something about our education system.
Well, these things aren't in a silo.
No, absolutely.
They're not in a silo.
You're right.
And the solution can't happen just by pouring more money into the school day if what's happening outside the school day isn't changing.
Right.
And so there is no solution. There's no money solution. There's no day and hour solution unless we're empowering parents. And so I think that's what really attracts me to the opportunity for all kids, is that who thought that we would ever have to advocate for parents' rights? Like, it's always been assumed that from a child's born until adulthood, which was 18, that those parents are responsible for the care and education of their children, that it is their job to take care of their children. And now we're seeing these people say, take away parent rights, take them away. Let's put a wedge between the parent and the child when children need their parents the most. So we're just going in the wrong direction.
Well, and I will only add one thing, and we're going to have to wrap this up in a second. So if you've got one last point to make, think of it right now. But the special session that the governor just called to address crime in our state, and whether she should have been doing it for the other 6 years of her administration, whether it's the problem of the legislature, maybe Mayor Keller in Albuquerque, or some of the other sources of the problem, we know unequivocally, and the Legislative Finance Committee has research indicating this, that changing our education system and getting more people into the workforce and qualified for work and connected with other people by succeeding in school is going to address the crime issues. And whether it's the progressives saying, oh, we need systemic changes, or the governor saying, we want to cut crime with these various bills, all signs point to dramatic overhaul of our education system if we're serious about crime.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. And I think the note that I would leave on is that, our effort right now is to protect parent rights, to let parents be an advocate for their child, whether that's public comment at a school board meeting, whether it's reviewing curriculum, whether it's being able to walk into a classroom and observe a classroom. Like, parents have a right to be engaged in their child's education. Parents, statistically, whether it's teacher education, classroom size, dollars spent, specialized training, all the studies will tell you that parents are the number one indicator of student success. So to engage parents is the direction we need to go. And so I would just say, if that's what you're interested in and you want to protect parents' rights, and you think that when children are going through adolescence or facing adversity or dealing with behavioral health issues, that's when they need their parents the most, and when we should partner with them and help them succeed, then Opportunities for All Kids is definitely something you should get involved in. And I don't know if you want to repeat all the different you had.
I'll just say send them to oaknm.org, and you can send an email to have Rebecca get in touch with you there. So appreciate your time today, Rebecca, and thanks for all the passion you bring to these issues and trying to make our state a better place, because, boy, this is one of the easiest ways that that needle could be moved very positively if we just got serious about education and empowering families. So thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.